There is a tree that drops free flower every autumn. Not flour substitute, not flour alternative, not something that resembles flour if imagination fills the gaps. Actual flour. Grind it, bake it, eat it. Flour that humans consumed for 6,000 years before wheat farming even existed on this planet. 800 million of these trees grow across North America right now. 800 million trees dropping billions of pounds of free flour every single October, while Americans remain completely oblivious. And what happens to all that flour? Squirrels eat it. Deer eat it. Pigs eat it. Wild turkeys fight over it. And humans. Humans walk right past it every single day to buy $50 billion worth of wheat flour shipped from industrial farms 1,000 miles away. One tree produces flour for 80 years. Not a typo. Not an exaggeration. 80 years of continuous production from a single planting. Never replant. Never buy seeds. Never pay for harvest equipment. Never depend on supply chains. Just collect what falls from branches that ask absolutely nothing in return. One mature tree drops enough flour to feed a family for an entire year. Every single year. For 8 decades straight. Meanwhile, Americans spend $30 to $80 annually on wheat flour that offers worse nutrition, requires constant annual replanting, demands expensive equipment and inputs, and creates total dependency on supply chains that collapse exactly when food security matters most. The flour industry knows about this tree. They've always known about it. They chose strategic silence because every family learning this truth represents a customer who stops buying their products forever. Every tree planted represents 80 years of lost revenue. Every child taught this simple processing method represents a generational break from flour dependency that the industry cannot reverse. This is not ancient history. This is not primitive survival food. Korean restaurants serve acorn dishes today. Japanese communities process acorns today. European foragers harvest acorns today. Only Americans remain ignorant of the flour dropping free in their own backyards. 14 minutes, that is all it takes to learn what the $50 billion flour industry has hidden for generations. The exact tree species that produce the sweetest flour, the simple kitchen process that removes all bitterness, the nutritional comparison that humiliates wheat on every metric, the economics that expose why schools teach wheat agriculture but never mention the 800 million flour trees already growing. One tree, 80 years, free flour. This is the file they hope nobody opens. There is a reason this knowledge disappeared from American education and public awareness. The oak tree cannot be patented. The acorns cannot be trademarked. The processing method cannot be licensed for royalties. Every single component of acorn flour production exists completely outside corporate control. No corporation can insert itself between the tree and the flour. Wheat created the opposite system perfectly designed for maximum profit extraction at every step. Wheat requires purchasing seeds annually from seed corporations. Wheat requires purchasing fertilizers continuously from chemical corporations. Wheat requires purchasing pesticides regularly from agrochemical corporations. Wheat requires purchasing equipment constantly from machinery corporations. Every single step of wheat production funnels money from farmers and consumers to corporations that profit from dependency. The seed industry alone generates $40 billion annually just in America. The fertilizer industry generates $200 billion globally. The pesticide industry generates $60 billion. The farm equipment industry generates $150 billion. These massive industries exist because annual crops, like wheat, require constant repurchasing year after year, without end. Oak trees require purchasing absolutely nothing after the initial planting. They fertilize themselves through natural leaf drop that builds soil year after year. They resist pests through natural tannin compounds that protect them without chemicals. They require no equipment beyond a simple bag for collection and a basic pot for processing. They produce abundantly for 80 years from one investment of $10 for a seedling. The economic comparison threatened to many powerful industries simultaneously. The knowledge had to disappear from public consciousness. Schools began teaching wheat agriculture as the foundation of civilization. Textbooks praised grain farming as human progress. The narrative erased 6,000 years of tree-based food security that preceded wheat cultivation. Native American children were forced into boarding schools where traditional knowledge was beaten out of them. Acorn processing died with elders who had no one left to teach. The deliberate destruction of indigenous food knowledge served agricultural industry interests perfectly. The result stands visible today: 800 million oak trees dropping billions of pounds of flour. Americans buying imported wheat while free food rots beneath their feet. A population completely dependent on supply chains for something growing in every neighborhood park. There is no nutritional competition between acorn flour and wheat flour when examined honestly. Acorns win decisively on nearly every metric that matters for human health and sustained energy. The comparison is so completely lopsided that the wheat industry has every financial reason to prevent people from ever examining it closely. Healthy fat content in acorns ranges between 10 and 30% depending on species and growing conditions. These fats are primarily monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fatty acids, the exact same heart-healthy fats praised in olive oil, avocados, and expensive nuts. The fats that support brain function, hormone production, cellular health, and sustained energy throughout the day without crashes. Wheat flour contains approximately 2% fat, 2% versus 30%. This comparison is not even remotely close. Acorns provide 15 times more healthy fats than wheat in every single serving. Complex carbohydrates in acorns release energy slowly and steadily over hours. Blood sugar rises gradually and maintains stable levels without dramatic fluctuations. No spike, no crash, no hunger cycle, driving overconsumption and metabolic dysfunction. Wheat flour spikes blood sugar rapidly with its high glycemic index, then crashes dramatically, creating the hunger patterns that drive constant snacking, overeating, weight gain, and long-term metabolic problems. The glycemic response difference between acorns and wheat is dramatic, measurable, and scientifically documented. Mineral content in acorns includes significant calcium for bones, phosphorus for cellular energy, potassium for heart function, and magnesium for hundreds of enzymatic processes. Oak roots penetrate deep into mineral-rich soil layers far below the surface that shallow wheat roots cannot possibly reach. Those minerals concentrate in acorns that drop free every autumn. Wheat grows in topsoil, depleted by decades of industrial monoculture, farming that strips nutrients faster than they can regenerate. Mineral content in commercial wheat has declined measurably over generations of intensive cultivation. Modern wheat contains significantly fewer minerals than wheat grown a century ago. The flour gets cheaper, and the nutrition gets worse simultaneously. Protein quality in acorns provides more balanced amino acid profiles than wheat protein. The body utilizes acorn protein more efficiently, despite slightly lower total percentage. Biological value measurements favor acorns over wheat for human nutrition. Research published in peer-reviewed journals confirms these comparisons. The research exists, the industry ensures, nobody sees it. The schools that receive agricultural industry funding never teach it. There is a simple process that transforms bitter acorns into sweet, delicious flour. The bitterness comes from tannins, natural protective compounds that discourage animals from eating acorns before they have a chance to sprout into new trees. Remove the tannins, and the natural sweetness emerges beautifully. The removal process requires nothing but water, time, and patience. Cold water leaching preserves the most starch for optimal baking applications and produces the best texture. Crack the acorns using a nutcracker, hammer, or simply by stepping on them carefully. Remove the shells and any dark papery skin covering the nut meat inside. Grind the pale nut meat into coarse meal using any blender, food processor, or grain mill available. Place the ground meal in a large glass jar and fill completely with cold water. Wait several hours or overnight while tannins dissolve out. The water turns dark brown as it absorbs the bitter compounds. Pour off the brown tannin-filled water completely. Refill the jar with fresh cold water. Wait again for several hours. Pour and refill again. Repeat this process until the water stays completely clear and the meal tastes sweet and nutty rather than bitter and astringent. This typically requires 5 to 10 water changes over 2 to 3 days, depending on species and tannin content. Hot water leaching accelerates the entire process dramatically for those who want faster results. Bring a large pot of water to rolling boil on the stovetop. Add ground acorn meal to the boiling water. Boil vigorously for 15 to 30 minutes while stirring occasionally, watching as water turns dark brown with dissolved tannins. Drain completely through a fine mesh strainer or cheesecloth. Add fresh water to the pot and bring to boil again. Add the same meal back and boil again. Drain again. Repeat this process until water stays completely clear and meal tastes sweet. This typically requires 3 to 5 boiling cycles completed in 2 to 3 hours total. After leaching by either method, spread wet meal thinly on baking sheets or dehydrator trays. Dry in a low oven at around 150 degrees Fahrenheit, or use a food dehydrator on the lowest setting, or simply air dry in a warm location with good airflow. Once completely dry and crumbly, grind into fine flour using blender, food processor, or grain mill. The resulting flour stores for months at room temperature in airtight containers. It stores for years in refrigerator or freezer. One autumn harvest provides flour for the entire year until next autumn brings another free harvest. No special equipment required, no expensive machinery needed, no expertise beyond following simple steps. Any kitchen already contains everything necessary to transform free acorns into superior flour. There is a spectrum of oak species offering different processing ease and flavor profiles for flour production. White oak group species contain lower tannin levels, requiring less leaching and producing sweeter flour with significantly less processing effort. These species should be prioritized by beginners and anyone wanting to minimize processing time while maximizing flavor quality. Quercus alba, the classic eastern white oak, produces acorns that Native American tribes prized above all others for flour production. The trees grow abundantly throughout eastern North America, identifiable by their rounded leaf lobes and light gray scaly bark. A mature white oak in a good year drops 300 to 500 pounds of acorns. Quercus macrocarpa, the bur oak, grows massive acorns with distinctive fringed caps resembling tiny decorative hats. The species ranges across the northern United States and well into southern Canada. Moderate tannin content makes processing straightforward while abundant. Reliable production ensures plenty of flour every autumn. Quercus lobata, the California Valley oak, supported entire thriving Native American civilizations with its reliable, abundant harvests year after year. These magnificent spreading trees grow only in California, but produce some of the sweetest, easiest processing acorns anywhere in the entire oak family. Quercus garryana, the Oregon white oak, provided staple flour for Pacific Northwest tribes for thousands of years. The trees remain common throughout their native range, dropping free flour every autumn, just as they have for millennia. Red oak group species require more leaching, but remain entirely usable and often grow more abundantly. Quercus rubra, the northern red oak, produces heavy acorn crops that process into excellent flour with additional water changes. The higher tannin content simply means more leaching cycles, not inferior results. Quercus palustris, the pin oak, grows rapidly and produces reliably heavy crops. Urban areas often contain many pin oaks planted as street trees, dropping free flour onto sidewalks where it gets swept away as litter. Any oak species produces usable flour with appropriate processing. White oak species simply require less effort. Learning to identify species pays dividends in saved labor for decades of future harvests. There is an economic reality the flour industry cannot allow people to understand clearly. A typical family spending $50 annually on commercial wheat flour will spend $4,000 over 80 years on this single staple food item. Adjusted for inflation and rising food prices, the lifetime expenditure likely exceeds $10,000 in future purchasing power. $10,000 on one ingredient that trees produce for free. One oak tree seedling costs between $5 and $15 at any nursery. One planting, one time. 80 years of continuous production. Total lifetime cost, $15 maximum. $15 versus $10,000 over an equivalent time period. The oak tree costs 0.1% what wheat flour costs over the same production period. The comparison is financially devastating for anyone selling flour. But the economic damage to industry extends far beyond direct flour sales. Families processing their own flour stop buying bread, pasta, crackers, cookies, and every other wheat-based product. The ripple effects threaten the entire processed food industry built on cheap wheat inputs. A family with one productive oak tree needs nothing from the flour supply chain. No trucks transport their flour, no warehouses store it, no retailers mark it up, no corporations profit from their hunger. Multiplied by millions of families, the threat to established industry becomes existential. The processed food industry generates over $1 trillion annually in America. Wheat flour serves as a primary input for a significant percentage of those products. Any meaningful shift toward home flour production threatens hundreds of billions in revenue. The industry responds the only way it can: silence, suppression, ensuring that schools never teach what oak trees provide, ensuring that cookbooks never include acorn recipes, ensuring that the connection between those trees in the park and the flour in the store never forms in public consciousness. There is a future available to anyone willing to plant a single tree today. An oak seedling planted this year begins producing acorns in 10 to 20 years, depending on species and growing conditions. The wait seems long only to those thinking in terms of quarterly earnings rather than generational prosperity. Production increases annually as the tree matures and its canopy expands to capture more sunlight. Peak production occurs between 50 and 80 years of age when the tree reaches full maturity. A tree planted by young parents reaches peak production when their grandchildren are raising families of their own. The timeline requires thinking beyond immediate gratification toward genuine generational planning that prioritizes legacy over convenience. But even before personal trees mature, existing oaks provide immediate abundance all around. Parks in every American city contain oak trees dropping free flower every autumn with nobody collecting it. Public lands across the country contain millions of oaks available for completely legal harvest. Neighbors' yards everywhere contain trees whose owners would happily allow collection of acorns they currently view as annoying nuisance litter to be raked and discarded. The resource exists right now. The knowledge exists right now. The only missing element is awareness that these two facts connect to each other. One family processing acorns demonstrates possibility to curious neighbors watching. One neighborhood adopting acorn harvest demonstrates possibility to the wider community. One community embracing free flour demonstrates possibility to the entire region. The industry cannot suppress knowledge that spreads through direct observation and personal conversation. They cannot prevent neighbors from talking over fences. They cannot stop families from sharing abundance with friends. They cannot control information that travels through relationships rather than media they sponsor. There is a choice that every viewer faces after learning this information. Continue buying wheat flour shipped from industrial farms 1,000 miles away. Continue supporting an industry that deliberately hides superior alternatives from public knowledge. Continue depending on fragile supply chains that fail during exactly the moments when food security matters most, like pandemics, economic collapses, and natural disasters. Or plant a tree that changes everything. One tree costs $15 and produces flour for 80 years without additional investment. One tree provides food security that no economic collapse can threaten. One tree offers superior nutrition compared to anything the commercial flour industry sells at any price. The oak trees have been waiting patiently for generations. They waited while Native American knowledge was systematically destroyed in government boarding schools. They waited while public education taught wheat agriculture as humanity's only option. They waited while Americans walked past billions of pounds of free flour to buy inferior products from distant corporations. They are still waiting. 800 million of them across North America alone, dropping billions of pounds of potential flour every autumn season. Waiting for people to remember what humans knew for 6,000 years before the flour industry made everyone forget. The file is now completely open. What happens next depends entirely on who shares this valuable information with others and who plants trees that will feed their grandchildren long after the planters are gone. 80 years of free flour from one tree. Better nutrition than wheat on every metric. Growing anywhere oaks survive. The industry prays desperately this video stops here. Prove them wrong. Subscribe now and hit the bell to see what else is hiding in plain sight while industries profit from public ignorance.